can you please tell us that, why a developing country like Malaysia should put priority on defense procurement? We have so many issues.
Well, it's a really important issue for two reasons. One is that defense and security really matters for a country. So actually, if the defense procurement is corrupt or incompetent, actually it means the equipment doesn't work properly, you put people's lives at risk. So that's the first reason why it really matters. The second reason it really matters is because these are quite big sums of money. Usually you're spending 2% or so of GDP, which is many hundreds of millions of dollars, and the defense sector historically has a record of spending this money rather badly, not just in this country but worldwide. So actually integrity in procurement, it either saves a lot of money or it means that you spend it correctly and you get the maximum amount for the money. And that's true in a lot of countries around the world. I mean, I wouldn't think of Malaysia as a developing country. I have the same level of concern in developed countries like Norway or Poland, whom I would regard very similarly.
Talking about the allocation for defense procurement, just to give you some information about Malaysia. In Malaysia, our allocation under our budget to the defense ministry, we have a ministry which is in charge of the defense issues. Usually the allocation is about 1.5 to 2% of our GDP. So is this figure adequate, or is it high or low?
I would say it's very average. If there was a global average, it would be about 2% of GDP. Countries that are manifestly spending a low and minimal proportion, you're down about 1%. Countries whom you'd regard as very heavy spenders on defense, you'd be at around 4 or 5%.
4 or 5.
2 is actually about the average.
But this is not only the procurement, it's the whole...
This is the whole of the defense and the armed forces, that's right.
That's right. So just to give you some idea of our allocation here. Basically, you can see that under our budget, we just our Prime Minister just announced the budget for next year, last month. And if you can see, in our budget documents, this is the most detailed document that we can get, the public can get. So this is on the expenditure of the allocation to our defense. But then you can see it only they categorize it into 2 different categories. One is the administrative expenditure. The other one is the development expenditure, which include the procurement of new equipments. So what we can get actually is just, this is the emolument.
That would be salary, I guess, would
just
it?
Then a lump sum, then the asset, a lump sum. Then you say that some service maintenance, a lump sum. Then in terms of this is then they will tell you the logistic how much, management is how much, training how much, operation and stuff like that. So in the development budget, this one is administration, this is the development. It divides into like, okay, this is the Navy. Okay, this is our Air Force. Then they will only tell you 2 categories. One is the construction or the development, then the second one is equipment, then they give you a lump sum. So there is no details about what specifically what are they buying or what are they spending on. So is this a international standard, or it can be more?
I would say that's much less detailed than you would expect. You'd expect something that has got pages and pages and pages of detail. It would not show you the detail of secret items, but it would show you a great deal more detail of for example, the asset purchases expected from each of the services. You'd expect it by category, and then even with such as ammunition or armored vehicles.
So they'll tell you ammunition, they'll tell you whether it's a vessel or a tanker.
Well, not just that, but you'd expect detail within that. So how much was the original purchase, how much would be maintenance, how much would be associated with that. That would be normal.
Oh, that would be normal.
That would be normal. So if what you've shown me there is the totality of what's available,
yes, yes.
I would say that's much less than you would normally expect. And you'd be looking for Parliament, who I guess would be approving these figures,
yes,
to be seeking a lot more detail.
Our members of Parliament, just for knowledge, our members of Parliament, they are debating based on these documents. Mm. So basically, you can see they are debating on nothing.
Well, in that case, I would think they should be asking for more, and I would have expected that the Defence Ministry or the Finance Ministry, whoever is responsible here, would actually be interested in giving more, because this is not about national security. This is about actually just presenting the details so people can understand what the money is being spent on.
Okay, Doctor. When you are talking about defense procurement, it always relates to the national security, and it will involve a lot of so-called secrets, national secrets, things that the government claim they cannot reveal. So, is there an international standard that how do you balance among the national security and the public interest?
It's a really central question, and actually I think most of the answer is reasonably straightforward, which is there are most certainly some issues that are national security issues, but almost always they are a minority of the budget, and they're a minority of the general issues that a defense ministry might talk about. So to give you an example or two, the defense budget, you would absolutely expect a lot of detail, and there would be a certain percentage, it might be like 1% or 2% of the budget, probably not more, that would be in a category called secret.
Oh, okay.
And even in that category, you would expect and hope that a committee of Parliament, quite often a subcommittee of the Defence Committee, if you have such a committee, that has, if you like, has a security classification, that they are allowed to see the detail of the secret budget, even though it can't be publicly revealed. I think the other thing that happens a lot in defence ministries is that it becomes a habit to classify things as secret. And this isn't to do with corruption particularly. I think this is a bureaucratic instinct, because actually it's easier to administer things if they're secret. You don't have to be as open about them as you do about other things. And in a lot of ministries around the world, they have recognized that this is the problem. So actually they have taken steps to reduce the classification of tenders, or to make tenders more open, for example, on procurement, because there's no reason to classify a tender for uniforms. Of course there isn't. And most countries recognize this. So when, if a ministry says it's for national security reasons, it might be directly true, but quite often actually it's a historical, what's the right word? It's just a historical practice that has grown up, and actually very often it's no longer necessary.
Just like we call it tradition, or it's a convention, things to do.
Well, I guess so. I guess I would call it bad habits.
But how much secret is considered secret? Because of course it's a very subjective thing for the government to actually define. For communists, of course, they'll say a lot of things are secret. But what actually constitutes secrets and what does not constitute secrets? Who should define it?
Well, I think who should define it? It should be the Ministry of Defence and the military, because they're in the best place to judge whether something should be secret or not. The issue is more what is the guidelines that they have as to how they classify it. To give you 2 or 3 very simple examples, in many countries, purchase of uniforms has been regarded as secret. This is ridiculous. Purchase of boots has been regarded as secret. This is ridiculous. So those, if you like, are the easy examples. But even if you take a harder example, let's take a main battle tank or an armoured personnel vehicle. Actually, the industry magazine is called Jane's Defence Weekly.
Yeah.
You can find most details of what most countries are buying in this magazine, regardless of the classification inside the country. So even for quite technical things like that, actually it's not true that they're secret. It might be a nice fiction, but actually it's not true. What you sometimes find is that components of major purchases are secret.
Oh.
So for example, on fighter planes, the avionics, the electronics, they're secret and for very good reason. But it doesn't mean the huge contract as a whole is secret, it just means the avionics component is secret. So if as a ministry you have a commitment to openness, actually you can go quite a long way down this track of being open about what you're procuring without in any way compromising security.
But the problem here is when our MPs question certain purchases, for example, say a tank, the minister, they may question why is it so expensive, but the minister, the reason that they will give you, okay, there are certain specs that are actually very high-tech and state-of-the-art, and you have no idea what they are, and it's secret, which is why, and they use that to justify the overall high price of the item. So how do you actually separate those components and the general price of the items?
Well, the honest answer is sometimes you can and sometimes you can't. So, to take an armoured personnel vehicle, there is a real limit to what can be special about that. It's just for carrying people, and it will have some degree of armour. That's not very secret. A main battle tank, there's lots of technology to do with the ability of the armour. So that's a correct description that some of that will be classified. So you can separate the issue into some things where it's just not true that the specification is secret, and therefore it's much better to be open about it, and some things where there genuinely are secret issues. I think to answer the question of whether it's value for money when you compare it to other countries, for example, there are two things you can do here. One is, inside your ministry, you can actually have a unit whose purpose is to compare prices internationally. That's what they do. So they're semi-independent of the people developing the tender and the people assessing the tender. But their job is to say, look, we have a little database of armoured personnel vehicles and they cost $10 million each, so why is ours costing 40? And they make a challenge process inside the ministry. Now that may or may not be possible to be made public. It depends how secret the specifications are. But where it can be, actually I think it's in the interest of the ministry to be open about it, saying, well, we have compared it and we think this is good value for money. What you can also do is you will have a military academy here, or you will have a think tank, or you'll have some security consultancies. There will be semi-independent groups here in Malaysia that are not part of government, and I would expect are competent enough to be able to do this kind of comparison, even if it involves secret materials. So I would have thought that actually it's not that difficult for such a group to have a reasonably authoritative voice. And that's the other place I would look to try to get to the bottom of that kind of question. There is one area where you can answer the question very simply, which is for less complicated goods. So if it's a standard pistol or it's a standard wheel for a vehicle, most probably you'd be looking to buy it electronically through electronic bidding, and that ought to be on the basis of price only. So that should be much less open to manipulation than ordinary either tendering or private negotiation. Or there are databases around the world of what these things cost, and that should be pretty publicly available. And you would expect the ministry to be using that data to force down the price from the seller. That's partly why those databases exist. But that can only be for simpler products. You know, the more complicated ones, you can't do such a simple